But it's a privilege to be here today. And before I want to start, just a few brief comments about some things we're experiencing around the state. And I promise not to bore you too long, but I wanted to sincerely thank this association for endorsing us in our run now to be lieutenant governor. It's most of you. There's many friends around the room that know my story. I'm a guy from North City, St. Louis that didn't know a horse from a cow, and some of you would say I still don't know that, but didn't know agriculture at all until I was in teenage years and bought my first farm and got involved in the cattle business. And it's just been humbling to have the agricultural families in this room and other families across the state embrace our family and help us in our journey to be a first-generation farmer, 32 years now. And then to have your association and many other ag associations endorse us to run for lieutenant governor has been a very humbling experience. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for putting your faith and trust in me, as well as Governor Parson, that will continue to lead the state in a great direction and understand how important agriculture is to our state. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you. As I travel the state, and as many of you know, we have been all over the place in our job, in our role. Governor Parson, former Lieutenant Governor Parson, when he asked me to do this job, he said, I want you to go out and make sure you're visiting all corners of the state and make sure you understand what's going on. And I said, I'm happy to do that. And what you find is Missouri is full of great people, great stories, some trials, some tribulations, but just unbelievable amount of folks that really are just inspiring to be around. And what I tell everybody is Missouri greatness is what I like to always talk about, is that as we travel the state, we continue to see story after story of people that are just unbelievably folks who are ordinary in your mind and maybe sitting at your table, but are inspiring and have done just many great things, extraordinary type things. There's a story that I remember meeting a guy, Krakow, Missouri. Some of you from that area might remember a young Marine back in the late 70s named Rocky Sickman, who's 19 years old and found himself in the hands of the Ayatollah, held up in Iran for 444 days as a hostage. And when Rocky came back, he decided to turn that into, I think he spent his 21st birthday there in captivity. He came back and decided to turn that into a positive, start speaking about his experience, went on to a very successful career with Anheuser-Busch. But just an ordinary guy doing his ordinary thing, serving his country, and ended up in the history books in one of the most unexpected, unfortunate situations ever. I served with a guy down in Nixa, Missouri in Christian County whose grandfather was born during the Civil War. I'll never meet anybody, most people in this room will never meet anybody that's just 2 generations away from the Civil War. Again, just a guy who's an ordinary guy that you don't expect much out of, but has extraordinary stories. And we find these all over the place, and I find it in agriculture. And it's not just with Director Chin, who you're going to hear from next, who has done an absolutely fantastic job, along with her team, leading our Department of Agriculture. We couldn't be in better hands, Chris, with you at the helm, so thank you for doing that. But I also like to say Missouri greatness is about our neighbors. A friend of mine, friend of many people in this room from down in Dexter, Missouri in Stoddard County, Charlie Cruz is president of Farm Bureau for a long time, and he used to say all the time, and I really took it to heart, in rural Missouri, we don't just know our neighbors, we help our neighbors. And our farm is about 80 miles south of Jefferson City, and down south, we're in that 44 corridor last night. Unbeknownst to many people, unless you're in the area, we had a nice little snowstorm that came through pretty quickly. And by the time I talked to a few folks and looked at the radar map and realized that I called one of my neighbors down there and said, hey, I didn't realize we had snow. Can you go ahead and put some hay out? He said, I just finished unrolling 3 bales. And so think about that. In Missouri, we don't just know our neighbors, we help our neighbors. And I'll do the same for him when I'm down there and he's tied up doing something with his family. That's what just makes the agriculture way of life just something that we just have just been so fortunate to be a part of. My wife is actually from up in the Illinois, Chicago area, and they had a farm right outside of Chicago in Joliet. And they are corn and bean farmers. And she used to tell me about walking the rows and hoeing through the beans, but for some reason she won't come and haul square hay with me these days. I don't know. She lost something in those bean fields. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about greatness when you talk about your award winner tonight, who you'll hear more of later. I have been to their facility, the award winner's facility, and when you talk about what the Leopold Conservation Award stands for, it fits these people just incredibly well, and you're going to hear another story about them and why they are part of what I think is Missouri greatness. But I just wanted to talk real quickly today to talk about an effort that Don Nicoderm and many other people, I think I see, is Mike Deering back there? What's the cattle guy doing at the pork industry place? He wants a good meal. Mike Deering is the only director of the Missouri Cattlemen's Association that one of our counties had their annual meeting. We had fried chicken. So I blame that on Mike Deering. I'm one of his proud members, by the way. And Mike, we already got your endorsement, so I can say anything I want about you. But the Cattlemen's Association, pork producers, many industry folks went together about a year ago and start trying to get in front of this world food demand. You've heard many people talk to it. If you've ever been to a place where Roy Blunt talks, you hear about this all the time. So I don't want to bore you, but you know the drill. It took us 2,020 years to figure out how to produce a level of food we do today to feed the world. Because of the population growth, world food demand is going to double in the next 25 years. 2,020 years to figure out how to feed people today, and in the next 25 years, we have to double that. And so the industry partners, the shareholders, the ag partners across the state went together, not taxpayer funded, they put their own money in and said, let's find out how Missouri can get its piece of the pie. And so corn growers, soybean, pork, cattle, all the producers, all the Farm Bureau, they all went together and they conducted this very in-depth survey last year, and the results of that were unbelievable. Missouri is in a position to absolutely work with our family farms, which 97, you hear people all the time saying, oh, these big corporate farms in Missouri, 97% of our farms are family owned and operated, and that's the heart and soul of what's sitting in this room right here. We want to make sure that a first-generation farmer like me or a third, fourth, or fifth-generation farmer who's sitting in the audience, that your future, your kids, your grandkids know that there's a future in agriculture. So the results of that survey were good enough that Chris Chin and Chris Dalbert from the University of Missouri came together with me and the governor, and they said, hey, we need to start this food and beverage task force. We need to find out what we can do to make sure Missouri is ready to go. And as you know, agriculture already represents an $88 billion industry to our state's economy. I mean, that's an incredible impact. The number two industry, by the way, is maybe a fourth of that number. It's way down in there. It's important, don't get me wrong. But agriculture is just that much of an impact. And when we looked at this study, if we can get in front of that world food demand, if we can prepare Missouri's farmers to be ready for that world food demand, we could potentially add to that $88 billion another $25 billion of impact to Missouri's family farms. We could produce over $4.4 billion in additional payroll. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money that we could do over the next several years in Missouri's agricultural products. So we're in the middle of, I'm fortunate enough, the governor asked me to co-chair that task force along with Chris Dalbert from the University of Missouri. We have Chris Chin on that task force. We have Dan Cassidy from Farm Bureau. We have Gary Marshall with Corn Growers. He never shows up, so we effectively have Ashley McCarty. Thank you. You're not nicer than Gary is. You can quote me on that. Gary's my neighbor. And then we have Senator Bernsketter, who's here with us tonight, that you'll be hearing more about later, and Representative Roan from down in the Boot Heel. And that task force then has 15 or 16-ish associate members that come and meet with us to try to figure out what we can do next. And, you know, I'm one of those guys that inherently don't trust the government very well. That's why I originally ran for a Senate seat. That might sound funny to you, but I'm very skeptical of most people in government. And so I don't think government can do anything really very good. Matter of fact, when you talk about Missouri greatness, I don't think government is what makes Missouri great. I think Missourians, I think you is what makes Missouri great. And so when we put this task force together, we wanted to have that in our mind, is that we don't want to be just another government entity that studies things and who knows whatever happens to all that stuff. We actually want to give you prepared, a future and a roadmap to find out where our expansion opportunities are and what we can do to work together to build on those opportunities. And our first report comes out in a couple of weeks. It just kind of establishes the baseline. We had listening sessions all across the state. We heard from hundreds and hundreds of different family farmers and people in the ag industry, suppliers, partners, stakeholders, you can name it, and just found out where we kind of are and what some of our challenges are. And by the way, just a real quick Reader's Digest version, one of our biggest opportunities is in the meat production side, whether it's beef or pork, so that's great to hear from you guys, but that's where we see a lot of our opportunities. And so we're going to continue to work on that so that our 95,000 farms, averaging 291 acres each, can take advantage of that as we move forward, as we meet that world food demand. I know the governor is absolutely 100% convinced, as a farmer himself, and as a real farmer. If you go to Mike Parson and say, do you know what it's like to have net wrap stuck in the bearing of your baler? He's going to say yes, because I taught him how to get his wife's kitchen knives out, a Cutco knife, and it will cut that net wrap out really good. And so I found out the hard way when my wife yelled at me for that. But, so he's done it. Many of you have seen multiple versions of the Farming for Life video the Department of Ag did, and Governor Parson had one, and Chris Chin had one, and I had one, and many family farmers have been on that, and I would encourage you to watch that. There's some inspiring stories on there. But one of the comments I made when they said that, I said, one thing about farming you never know is you never know when you're going to have a dead battery, a broken hydraulic hose, and a flat tire, and some days all three of those things at one time. And I've had farmers from all over the place that came out right around the state fair from all over the place said, how did you know all that? And I said, because it's happened to me about every other day, just as it has in the people in this room. So we want to continue to make sure with our task force, and we're going to ask people in this room that just don't know it yet to help us with that as we move forward. I met with Dean Dalbert and Scott Brown, who many of you have met, the economists at Kaffner at the University of Missouri. We're going to list the best of the best people. We just met this week on how we're going to go forward with next steps and what we're going to do to provide what I call some real meat on the bone with Farm Missouri's farmers as we look at what the next steps of agriculture can be, because we believe that we can do that, and we're going to get ramped up, and we're going to absolutely accomplish that. And our goal is to have some of these growth initiatives in place within the next several years, by 2027. Now that sounds like a long way off if you're an old guy like me. But it's not that far off that we can get some of these initiatives in place and keep working with it. The average age of a farmer in our state is 58 or 59. I hear the number change every once in a while. I guess somebody dies and somebody gets in it. I don't know how that all works, but that's just not where we need to be. We need to make sure we've got our young people. When you hear the governor talk about workforce development, part of that is to make sure make sure our young folks understand, whether they're your sons and daughters or granddaughters or just kids on the farm or just a dummy like me from St. Louis who thinks agriculture is cool, the opportunities in agriculture that they have right now, especially with our advancement in technology. I mean, these kids, they're flying drones, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff that you and I, some of us never probably even imagined. And so sometimes kids think, well, if I'm going to be a farmer, that means I'm going to be stuck in a tractor all day, in the middle of planting, or I'm going to be working cattle at a head chute. And yeah, you could be doing all those things, but there's an incredible amount of opportunities for young people in all parts of agriculture right now, especially with the technology, with the marketing, with the research, with the development. And we're right in the middle of that corridor between Kansas City and St. Louis, where you've seen Bunge expand, you've seen Bayer buy Monsanto and then expand, you've seen all of these great USDA coming to Kansas City, first time any two divisions of federal government ever moved out of D.C., coming to Missouri. And so we are absolutely in a prime spot. And if nothing else you leave here tonight, even though, as our friend from Iowa said, that we're in a little bit, and I know from talking to many of you, in a little bit of a dip with some of our commodity industries in hogs and some in soybeans, et cetera. There's, this thing's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And anybody who's been in the business, I was in the car business for years and years and years. I don't know if that makes me better or worse, in your opinion, a car dealer or a politician. But as you know, markets go like this, and people who work hard and look towards the end of the tunnel, they know there's a light in the tunnel and it's not a train. They figure out how to just kind of keep skimming from the bad market to the best market, and then we figure out a way to get through. I know that Missouri's family farms, I know that Missouri greatness, I know the stories in this room can produce those same results as we move forward into the future. And one thing I can tell you is that we're going to continue to work hard with our agricultural partners to make sure Missouri's ag industry stays on top. It's clearly on top, and that we continue to produce multiple other opportunities for our Missouri family farms. Listen, I just wanted to kind of end with the fact that I'm standing before you today is something that I don't take for granted. As I mentioned, I'm a city boy who was the youngest of 6 kids. My dad left when I was a year old. My mom raised us all by herself. You know, I never take for granted where I came from. And, you know, folks, only in this country, in this state, do you hear stories like that. Now, there's other stories in this room that have the same background. They've had the same kind of great American experience. But that's something that I think about every day when I go in that Capitol, or every day when I'm out on one of the farms with you guys, looking at your operation, seeing what you do. It's just a humbling experience to be able to represent Missourians. And it's an incredibly humbling experience to be able to represent Missouri's farm families and agriculture, because it is who we are. The goddess of agriculture is on top of our Capitol, whether you like it or not. And it's because we're an agrarian state. It's not because I see people kneeling out on the front lawn praying to her. It's because it represents the heritage and the meaning of what our state and the people that organized our state and started our state and have been in our state for hundreds of years were all about. And that's what the Founding Fathers, that's what our forefathers wanted, is this celebration of agriculture. And that's what this room and this night represents. So thank you so much for allowing me to be that representation for you. I am absolutely looking forward to helping you for the years to come. With your help, we will continue to do that. We will continue to work through the Food and Beverage Task Force. I would encourage you through the Pork Association and multiple other associations that you're probably part of to continue to watch for updates. You will see that. And when we ask for your help and input and guidance, we'd sure appreciate having that, because, again, we don't have the solution to the problems, but you all do. And I think together we can move us into the next level. So thank you. Congratulations to the award winners tonight. And thank you so much for allowing me to have just a few minutes to say hello to you. God bless everyone.